Okay, so we've all heard of Night of the Living Dead, right? The 1968 classic that kinda kicked off the whole zombie craze? After that, the 70s saw a bunch of zombie movies popping up, and while they didn't all have the same impact as the original, a lot of them were actually pretty great. They took the whole zombie idea and did their own thing with it, and honestly, some of that turned out way better than we expected. So, here are 12 zombie movies from the 70s that we think are totally worth checking out. Before we get into the list, however, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Zombie, 1979. Alright, this movie is your classic case of maybe just listen when someone's trying to warn you. Seriously, half the mess in this movie could have been avoided if people just paid attention. This movie had us yelling at our screens and insulting the characters for their stupidity, but overall it was a pretty great watch. Things kick off when this creepy, abandoned sailboat drifts into New York Harbor with a surprise guest on board, a gross, rotting zombie who immediately takes out a harbor cop. From there, reporter Peter West teams up with Anne, whose dad owned the boat and has mysteriously vanished. They head off to this spooky Caribbean island called Mattol to look for him, and along the way, they link up with a tourist couple, Brian and Susan, who are just trying to enjoy a casual cruise, until things get really messy. On Mattol, they meet Dr. Menard, who's researching a mysterious disease that kills islanders and resurrects them as flesh-eating zombies. His terrified wife, Paula, wants to leave the island but becomes one of the undead's first victims when a zombie brutally kills her by impaling her eye on a wooden spike. The protagonists discover the zombie epidemic spreading across the island. An underwater zombie kills Susan during a scuba dive while the group encounters reanimated Spanish conquistadors rising from an old cemetery. They take refuge at Menard's makeshift hospital, but the building becomes surrounded by zombies attacking from outside while patients die and reanimate inside. During the climactic battle, Dr. Menard, his assistant Lucas, and the nurse are all killed, then reanimated, then killed again by Brian's gun. The three survivors, Peter, Anne, and Brian, escape to their boat, but Brian, who was attacked in a vulnerable moment by a reanimated Susan, dies from zombie bites and gets reanimated himself. Trying to get out of the cabin, the other two locked him in. Meanwhile, the zombie plague has reached New York City, with hordes of the undead marching across the Brooklyn Bridge into Manhattan, suggesting that a global apocalypse has begun. The Grapes of Death, 1978. This one was originally called Les Raisons de la Mort in French. We managed to watch through it with the little French we knew, but the reason behind the outbreak in this movie is kinda stupid. Really stupid, honestly, and we don't know how or why anyone thought it was a good idea, but what's done is done, and nothing can be done to change that. The story follows Elizabeth, who's currently traveling by train to move in with her fiancé Michael at his vineyard in Roubles. During her journey, she encounters infected passengers with grotesque neck ulcers, and she even finds her new friend Bridget dead. After fleeing the train, Elizabeth seeks help in a nearby village but discovers the infection has spread widely. She encounters Pierre and his daughter Antoinette. Pierre has become violently insane from the infection and kills his family before Elizabeth escapes in his car. Throughout the village, she finds more infected people driven to murderous madness, stumbling around like zombies, their bodies covered in oozing ulcers. The cause for this? Still unknown. After several encounters with both infected victims and other survivors, Elizabeth teams up with two uninfected men, Paul and Lucien. They deduce the outbreak occurred after a wine festival and head to Michael's vineyard, hopefully to receive answers. At the vineyard, Elizabeth discovers Michael is infected but still rational. He reveals he created the pesticide that contaminated the wine and caused the infection. The outbreak spread rapidly because he had been employing undocumented workers, preventing him from alerting authorities when the crisis began. Despite Michael's warnings, Elizabeth embraces him, becoming infected herself. When Paul discovers them, Michael forces Paul to shoot him to avoid descending into madness. Now infected, Elizabeth kills both Paul and Lucien. The film concludes with her allowing Michael's blood to drip onto her face, suggesting her complete surrender to the infection. Dawn of the Dead, 1978. Everything went wrong. Then right, then wrong again because some idiot decided to meddle. That's the story. That's literally it. The human urge to meddle in things that don't concern you or even wreck something to the point of no return, all for what? We don't know, and we don't get it either, but it is how you get bitten or killed in one of these movies, or even hated by viewers. You'll understand what we mean in a second. So this mysterious plague starts turning the recently dead into flesh-eating zombies, and the whole country just falls apart. Millions die and come back, and society basically crumbles overnight. Rural areas manage a little better thanks to natural barriers, like Johnstown, but cities, total chaos. In Philadelphia, a traffic reporter named Steven and his pregnant girlfriend Fran decide to peace out by stealing a news chopper. Meanwhile, SWAT officers Roger and Peter are stuck dealing with a housing project raid where people are refusing to hand over their dead. Things spiral fast thanks to a mix of zombie attacks and racist cops. Yup. Somehow the cops were just as much of a threat as the undead. Roger and Peter, fed up with the whole system, end up joining Steven and Fran's plan to get the hell out. The four flee Philadelphia in the stolen helicopter and discover a shopping mall, deciding to make it their refuge due to the abundant supplies. They barricade entrances and clear zombies from inside, but Roger becomes reckless and gets bitten during the operation. The survivors enjoy a hedonistic lifestyle with unlimited consumer goods until Roger dies from his wounds and must be killed when he reanimates. Months pass with no government broadcasts suggesting societal collapse. They prepare for potential evacuation by loading up the helicopter with necessary supplies beforehand, and Steven teaches Fran how to fly it. A biker gang discovers their hideout, then breaks into the mall. It might have been for supplies, but with the barriers broken, the damage was done. And now, hundreds of zombies were pouring inside. Steven foolishly engages the looters in battle, gets bitten, and later reanimates, leading zombies to their safe room. Peter kills zombie Steven while contemplating suicide before joining Fran on the roof. The two escape in the helicopter with limited fuel, facing an uncertain future. Fantasm, 1979. This one starts off with sex at a cemetery. A frickin' cemetery. Who has sex at a cemetery and thinks that's a genuinely good idea? Do you seriously want your everything to be out and about with ghosts around? We understand the desire to get freaky in freaky places, but a cemetery? Whoever thought that would be a good place to do the deed, you know what I mean? This supernatural horror story begins when Tommy is killed during sex with a woman who's actually a local mortician in disguise as the Lady in Lavender. At Tommy's funeral, 13-year-old Mike observes the mysterious mortician, the tall man, effortlessly lifting Tommy's heavy coffin back into the hearse instead of burying it, arousing Mike's suspicions. Mike's older brother, Jody, initially dismisses his concerns until Mike brings him a severed finger from the tall man, continues moving and dripping yellow fluid. The finger transforms into a flying insect, convincing Jody and their friend Reggie that something supernatural was occurring. Inside the mausoleum, Mike encounters deadly flying silver spheres and discovers that the dead are being transformed into hooded dwarf slaves. The trio uncovers an interdimensional portal showing a red alien world where these dwarves toil as laborers for the tall man. After several encounters with reanimated corpses, dwarf attackers, and the shape-shifting Lady in Lavender, the brothers devise a plan to trap the tall man in an abandoned mine shaft. They succeed in burying him under an avalanche of rocks. But then, plot twist, Mike wakes up in his bed and Reggie tells him that Jody actually died in a car crash last week. Apparently, everything that had happened was just a grief-fueled nightmare. Or was it? Because just as Mike's packing for a road trip with Reggie, the tall man randomly shows up and those creepy hands burst through the mirror, dragging Mike in. So yeah, nightmare, reality, who even knows at this point? Death Dream, 1974. Okay, this one had us traumatized. The way you never know what's coming or when it happens, the emotional turmoil of the characters, the somewhat tragic and terrifying reveal, everything put us in mental instability mode. It's like the director strapped us into a roller coaster and told us to have fun on what looks like a straight track, but is actually filled with invisible loop-de-loops. In 1972, American soldier Andy Brooks was killed by a sniper in Vietnam. As he dies, he hears the voice of his mother, Christine, urging him to come home as he promised. After the family receives Andy's death notice, Christine gets irate and stubbornly refuses to accept it, while the father, Charles, and sister Kathy grieve. Andy mysteriously appears at their door in uniform, seemingly alive and unharmed. The family assumes his death was a military error, though Andy cryptically says he was dead when questioned. Andy exhibits disturbing behavior. He's withdrawn and sullen during the day, but oddly active at night, wandering the town and visiting the cemetery. The police are investigating a trucker's murder, the same trucker who brought Andy home and found him drained of blood. Andy's behavior escalates as he attacks an innocent little boy and kills the family dog for protecting him. Dr. Allman, a family friend, becomes suspicious when he can't detect Andy's pulse or heartbeat during an examination, which was pretty much a setup by Charles. Andy kills the doctor and injects his blood to sustain his decaying body. When he heard the news, Charles realized his son was responsible for the deaths. While out at a drive-in movie with Kathy, his sister, his girlfriend Joanne, and his friend Bob, Andy's decay becomes visible. He kills Joanne and Bob, then attempts to kill Kathy before fleeing. Devastated by seeing what his son has become, Charles commits suicide. As Christine drives Andy away, police shoot him and their car catches fire. The pursuit ends at a cemetery where Andy's decaying corpse is found in a shallow grave that he had dug for himself. Christine tearfully covers the body as her car explodes, telling officers Andy's home. The Crazies, 1973. This one had us wondering why America was the way it was in the movie. Why would you do what you did in your own goddamn country? Why would you set off something like that in your own damn country? We can only wonder just what exactly happens in the US military that these kind of incidents have become normal enough to let something like that slide. The story begins when a man kills his wife and burns down his farmhouse, prompting firefighter David and his partner Clank to respond to the scene. David's pregnant girlfriend, Judy, a nurse, treats the arsonist's burned children at Dr. Brookmeyer's office. The incident stems from a military plane crash that released Trixie, a highly contagious bioweapon that contaminates the town's water supply. The virus causes victims to either die or become violently insane. The government responds by sending Colonel Peckham and Dr. Watts to contain the outbreak, then declares martial law and quarantines the entire town. Military forces forcibly relocate residents to a high school and shoot anyone attempting to escape. Nuclear bombers stand ready to destroy the town if necessary. David, Judy, Clank, teenager Kathy Fulton, and her father Artie attempt to escape through the woods, evading soldiers and helicopters. The group's situation deteriorates as the infection spreads among them. After learning about the virus from captured soldiers, David realizes that Kathy, Artie, and Clank are infected. Artie hangs himself after Clank beats him. Kathy is killed by soldiers, but Clank sacrifices himself to help David and Judy escape. Judy eventually succumbs to the infection and is killed by civilians. David surrenders and discovers that he's immune to the virus, but keeps this secret. Dr. Watts develops a potential cure, but dies in a stampede before delivering it. The film ends with Colonel Peckham being reassigned to Louisville. The virus has reportedly spread. Shockwaves, 1977. We have only 2 words for this film: Nazi damage. That's right, another shitshow caused by the Nazis. As if all the racism and genocide wasn't enough, now we can also blame Nazis for zombies. Honestly, what haven't they done? A group of tourists on a pleasure boat experience engine trouble and navigate through a mysterious orange haze before their vessel is rammed by a massive cargo ship at night. When they wake, their captain is missing. With their boat taking on water, the group evacuates to a nearby island where they discover the captain's drowned body and find a huge decades-old shipwreck stranded on the reef. They take shelter in a rundown hotel inhabited by a reclusive old man who initially denies the wreck's existence, but eventually reveals his dark secret. The man is a former Nazi commander who created the Death Corps, aquatic zombie super soldiers designed as weapons. When the zombies proved uncontrollable and attacked their own forces, he sank their ship at war's end and went into exile. Now, the ship has risen from the ocean floor, releasing the undead soldiers. The zombies systematically hunt and kill the survivors. Cook Dobbs is cornered and killed in the water, tourist Norman is drowned in a stream, and Chuck drowns in the hotel's swimming pool. The commander attempts to control his former soldiers, but is also killed by them. The remaining survivors, Keith, Rose, Beverly, and Chuck, barricade themselves in the hotel's refrigerator, but stress causes infighting, and Chuck accidentally blinds Beverly with a flare gun. Eventually, only Keith and Rose remain, attempting to escape in a glass-bottom rowboat. Keith defeats one zombie but is killed by another just as they reach safety. Rose is rescued by fishermen but has gone completely insane, writing nonsense in her hospital journal. Rabid, 1977. Okay, we had one question throughout this entire movie. Where the actual hell do they get their materials from? Respectfully, what did you put on that poor girl for her to turn into a rabies-infested creature? It's so ugh. You'll understand what we mean in a minute. Rose Miller and her boyfriend, Hart Reed, are injured in a motorcycle accident in Quebec. While Hart recovers from minor injuries, Rose suffers severe burns and undergoes experimental skin grafting at the Keloid Clinic for plastic surgery. The procedure causes Rose to mutate, developing a stinger-like organ under her armpit that she uses to feed on human blood. However, she doesn't realize the creature she's become and roams rather normally. Her victims don't remember the attacks, but develop a rabies-like infection that turns them into violent, zombie-like creatures. Rose initially tries feeding on a cow but becomes sick, confirming she can only survive on human blood. After infecting several people at the clinic, including Dr. Keloid himself, Rose escapes to Montreal, where she continues feeding while staying with her friend Mindy. The infection spreads rapidly throughout the city, with victims attacking others in a chain reaction of violence. The government declares martial law as a final effort, deploying the Canadian Army with shoot-to-kill orders as rabies treatments prove ineffective. Hart searches the quarantined city for Rose while the epidemic worsens. Rose finally realizes she's the source of the outbreak when she feeds on Mindy and witnesses the infection's effects firsthand. She conducts a final test by infecting a man in an apartment building to confirm her suspicions. However, when the newly infected man turns violent, he attacks and kills Rose, pretty much ending the source of the infection. The film ends with hazmat-suited soldiers discovering Rose's body in an alley and disposing of it in a garbage truck, bringing the source of the epidemic to an end. Let sleeping corpses lie, 1974. Yeah, the government is pretty much useless in this movie. Religious law enforcement is also basically useless. There should be a rule in the police handbook that says no officer should have a holier-than-thou attitude about anything, and they should handle crises with an open mind. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the title of this movie sums it up pretty accurate. George Meaning's motorcycle is damaged by Edna Simmons at a petrol station, forcing her to give him a ride to his destination. While searching for the house of Edna's sister Katie, they encounter men from the Ministry of Agriculture testing an experimental ultrasonic radiation machine designed to kill insects. Edna is attacked by a mysterious man who emerges from a river, but he disappears when she returns with George. Meanwhile, Katie, a heroin addict, and her photographer husband Martin are at their remote cottage. The same attacker kills Martin at a waterfall during a photo shoot, and Katie flees just as George and Edna arrive. When they report Martin's death, police suspect the trio of foul play. George secretly develops Martin's film, but the killer doesn't appear in the photos because he is actually a vagrant who drowned in the river and became a zombie. At the local hospital, babies begin to exhibit strange homicidal behavior. George and Edna discover the vagrant's empty coffin in a church crypt where they encounter multiple zombies, including the reanimated vagrant. After escaping and fighting off the undead, George realizes the ministry's ultrasonic machine is causing the dead to rise within a 5-mile radius. Despite George's attempts to destroy the machine, officials don't believe him and police are ordered to shoot him on sight. The machine continues reanimating corpses throughout the area, including at the hospital where Katie and Edna are eventually killed. George burns the hospital zombies but is shot by the disbelieving police inspector, only to return as a zombie himself while the machine continues to operate. Tombs of the Blind Dead, 1972. This one refers back to the Catholics. For a teensy bit of background, the Knights Templar are, or were, a group of knights that were employed to protect the Holy Land from Christian pilgrims back in the 12th century. But they were accused of heresy and disbanded and suppressed in the 14th century by the Pope at the time. This movie covers what they've apparently been up to until now. Set in the abandoned medieval town of Berzano on the Spanish-Portuguese border, this story follows a legend that the Knights Templar rise from their tombs at night as blind revenants, their eyes having been pecked out by birds, while their bodies rotted on gallows after being executed for witchcraft and heresy. Virginia White is vacationing with her friend Roger Whelan when she reconnects with her former college lover, Betty Turner, who now runs a local mannequin factory. When Roger invites Betty on a train journey, Virginia becomes jealous and jumps off the train in anger. She wanders to Berzano's ruins and camps overnight, where the undead knights attack and kill her. The next morning, Roger and Betty search for Virginia and learn about the legend from locals and police investigators. At the morgue, Virginia's corpse reanimates and kills a custodian before fleeing to Betty's factory, where she's destroyed by fire. Betty and Roger investigate the legend with Professor Candale, who directs them to his smuggler son, Pedro, near Berzano. Suspecting Pedro of Virginia's murder, they convince him to help prove the knights exist. Pedro and his lover Maria accompany Betty and Roger back to Berzano. The knights, however, attack the group, killing Roger, Pedro, and Maria. Betty escapes, but the knights pursue her, tracking her through her heartbeat. She boards a passing train where she hides in the coal cargo. The knights commandeer the train, killing the conductor and cannibalizing the passengers. When the train reaches the station, horrified would-be passengers discover the carnage inside, while the traumatized Betty is helped by station attendants. Horror Express, 1972. We might be onto a pattern or something here because, once again, this entire mess could have been avoided if one guy had just kept his hands off stuff that wasn't his. But honestly, this might be one of the rare times things kind of worked out, mainly because the chaos happened in a contained space, not out in some city, so the damage was limited and the monsters could actually be taken down pretty fast. We'll see what we mean. So here's the setup. British anthropologist Professor Alexander Saxton finds this frozen prehistoric-looking creature in Manchuria and decides it's probably some missing link in human evolution. He loads it onto a train to transport it back, and riding along with him are a bunch of other characters, including his rival Dr. Wells, a Polish count and countess, their super intense spiritual advisor Father Pujardov, who's convinced the crate has something really evil inside, an inspector named Mirov, and some soldiers. Needless to say, things go downhill real fast. When Wells bribes a porter to examine Saxton's mysterious crate, the defrosted creature kills the porter and escapes, murdering several passengers. Wells's autopsy reveals the humanoid absorbs victims' skills and memories. After soldiers kill the creature, Saxton and Wells discover the real threat is a formless extraterrestrial that inhabited the humanoid's body and has now possessed Inspector Mirov. The alien, stranded on Earth for millennia, systematically kills passengers with knowledge needed to build a spaceship. When Captain Kazan kills Mirov, the dying Pujardov allows the creature to possess him. Saxton discovers the alien's weakness to light and blinds it temporarily. The creature tempts Saxton with advanced knowledge, but when refused, resurrects its victims as zombies. Saxton and the survivors fight through the train to reach the brake van, which they uncouple from the main train. Kazan's superiors telegraph ahead, ordering the train to be derailed down a siding into a gorge. The film ends with the survivors watching the alien-possessed train crash and burn into a gorge below, presumably destroying the extraterrestrial threat that had been terrorizing passengers throughout their journey across Siberia. Within the Woods, 1978. Again with the meddling, it's ridiculous. They made a similar movie with a similar moral in 1995 called Jumanji. Ever heard of it? Okay, well there are tons of other movies that scream, stop touching things that don't belong to you. There's a reason they're abandoned, so let them be. Of course, people only learn that lesson the hard way, and again, this movie will tell you why. The movie starts off by introducing two couples, Ellen and Bruce and Scotty and Shelley. The four of them are spending a weekend at a remote woodland cabin. While Ellen and Bruce go on a picnic, Scotty and Shelley stay behind playing Monopoly. During their picnic, Bruce reveals they're camping on a Native American burial ground and discovers an ancient dagger, which he takes despite warning Ellen not to disturb the graves. When Ellen wakes from a nap, she finds Bruce missing and discovers his mutilated corpse in the woods. She's then stalked by a demonic entity and flees back to the cabin. The others don't believe her story, so Scotty goes to investigate while Shelley searches for both missing men. However, a possessed Bruce kills Shelley with the stolen dagger, telling her to join us. Ellen arms herself with knives and accidentally stabs Scotty when he returns, mistaking him for the entity. The possessed Bruce attacks Ellen, but she manages to trap him outside after stabbing his hand repeatedly. She retrieves a gun from the cellar, but finds Scotty has been killed. Bruce continues his relentless assault, prompting Ellen to cut off his hand and use the severed appendage, still clutching the dagger, to stab him. Ellen brutally dismembers Bruce's body with an axe, but he continues to attack. Traumatized by the violence, she rocks back and forth in shock. The film ends ambiguously, as Scotty's corpse suddenly reanimates and prepares to attack the oblivious Ellen, with the screen cutting to black. Marvelous verdict! Overall, these were some solid picks, honestly way better than we expected. We're not usually that big on zombie movies, especially the older ones, but these ones really surprised us. Even if the stories are a little bit silly or cliche, they are made with a lot of love and creativity. But we want to hear from you. Do you have a favorite zombie movie from the 70s that we missed? Drop it in the comments because we want to check it out. We're always looking for topics for new videos. As always, if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.